Welcome back to another episode of Extra Points. 37-3 is the final here from SB Ballard Stadium as JMU defeats ODU. Joining me today is a sports editor for the Breeze, Madison Hricik. Madison, interesting first game here in the Royal Rivalry as far as football terms go. What did you see out there?
You know, I thought it was a pretty cohesive performance on both sides of the ball. Starting out with a 3-and-out for the defense was huge for JMU, and then having Todd Centeio come back and, get a touchdown on that first drive was also massive. I mean, that was a signal that this was going to be a game kind of like those first 5 games we saw at the beginning of this season where they were at that electric start. I really thought overall that they played pretty evenly on both sides of the ball. Obviously, like Signetti mentioned, there were errors, there were a couple lucky bounces here and there. Definitely some things that the Dukes can still improve upon now that they're going to go home and they're going to face Georgia State and Coastal Carolina in that order to wrap up the season.
I mean, you talked about Todd Centeio, your Oyster Bowl MVP today. He had a great game. He did go off with a little ankle injury early on in the game, but was able to come back, bounce back, and win that MVP. What did you see out of the quarterback today?
Tenacity. I mean, to put it shortly, he, as Chris Thornton described, is a soldier, and that is an exact quote there. I mean, he has gone through so much this year, and he has continually said that he wants to give everything that he has to this team in his final year of eligibility, and he's doing just that physically, mentally, on the field, off the field. You can definitely see it, and, I think it really showed up during this game against ODU.
Talking about Todd, continuing on with players maybe battling some injuries. Jalen Walker coming back today, had a pick 6. What did you see out of the young linebacker?
He's been a player that has been on everybody's radar when you're covering this team since day one. It's not necessarily a surprise to see him come back and get a pick 6 so quickly. The last pick 6 he had was during that comeback win at App State that you and I loved watching that game. We had a great time there. But, Jalen Walker, he's fast, he's athletic, he's very agile, he moves very well, and that boded really well against this ODU offense and, being able to shut down the run game just as much as they were able to shut down the passing game.
And JMU now 6-3 on the season. If they were bowl eligible, they would be eligible now after the 6th win. Coming off 3 losses now, getting this win, big for the team. How can they continue this momentum moving forward with 2 more home games left this season?
If there's any sort of conversation that starts sparking up about JMU should they be able to participate in a bowl game, they need to block that out. They need to ignore that. That is something that the fans and the media can talk about. That's not something that this team needs to focus on if they want to continue and potentially vie for, a higher ranking in the Sun Belt East. I know Coastal Carolina is playing really, really strong right now. They're 1 win away from clinching the East Division. But at the same time, this team needs to focus on Georgia State. They can't focus on everything else that's going on. They can't focus on Coastal Carolina, and they need to focus on Georgia State and what that team is going to be bringing to Bridgeforth next week.
Indeed. Any final thoughts here while at ODU?
I think for our final road game as Breeze reporters, which is a little bittersweet, I thought it was a great game overall. I thought, like I said, JMU played well on both sides of the ball. One player I definitely want to mention, we didn't really talk about him too much, Chris Thornton. He had a very historic day for himself and for JMU. He had passed 2 records held by 2 JMU wide receiver greats, Brandon Ravenel and Gary Clark. Huge names in the program, and so that was great for him to be able to do that, even though he wasn't able to get into the end zone for the Dukes today. So overall, I thought everybody had a pretty strong game. Still some things to clean up, but this was the way that they needed to end their road trip before returning to Bridgeforth for their final 2 games.
Indeed, 37-3 here, JMU with the victory over ODU. Bittersweet indeed. I know the game was great for JMU, but I think it was great for us too. JMU will play Georgia State next weekend, next Saturday at 2 p.m.